read 7 books in the 30th week of 2026, so let's go over my thoughts and ratings. Getting Away with Murder by Shari is a thriller that follows Ted and Jill, and they are used to their lavish lifestyle, so when they stumble into financial ruin, they decide the best way to save their status is to murder a family member and get their inheritance. But of course, things are not that simple. I knew going into this that this probably wouldn't be my taste. I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I just don't like stories that surround money, where money is a motivating factor for things. I just do not care, and I almost always have a hard time getting invested in stories where money is the focus. That being said, I have read all of Shari books, so I wasn't gonna stop now. Pushing past that, this had some intriguing, unlikable characters. I was specifically interested in Jill. I thought she was the most interesting to follow. Though this wasn't my taste, I can recognize that the moments that were crafted to be intense really would have had me on the edge of my seat if I were invested. I also will say there were some very well-placed red herrings, and there were moments throughout that did surprise me. If you're somebody who likes dysfunctional family drama, blackmail, webs of deception, and rich people behaving badly, then this might be for you. I did not hate this story by any means. I was ultimately entertained, and I did really enjoy the ending. I thought it was very satisfying, and I did think it was a well-crafted story, so I'm rating it 3.5 stars. Next up, I did a buddy read of Blacktail by Scott Hawkins. It publishes on September 1st, and I did it with Kelsey, Madison, and Sydney, who are some of my best friends here on TikTok. This is a fantasy horror book following a wolf named Blacktail who is devoted to the forest god. When his beloved mate, a house dog, is killed, he decides he's going to set out for vengeance against the human race. Throughout this story, we follow Blacktail as he encounters many types of animals, from domestic to not so domestic, friend and foe, some with supernatural abilities and others without. I absolutely loved The Library at Mount Char by Scott Hawkins, and so I went into this with high expectations of weirdness, and it did not disappoint. It is very rare that you come across a book where you're following an animal's perspective, and this was so unique, and I had such a great time with it. They have like an entire lore, and it is so interesting and so creative the way that this was put together, and the way that they talk to each other is absolutely charming, and I was just eating it up. There's even a squirrel death cult, which I just thought was hilarious and so entertaining. This story takes a look at human brutality and the disregard for animal cruelty. With each twist and turn and obstacle, the brutality of the story just shines through. It is violent, action-packed, and emotionally charged. When I was picturing this story in my head, I kept picturing like a dark version of like Balto or Fox and the Hound, and I just could not get that out of my head. This was just such an excellent read. It was bizarre, and it had a bleak yet beautifully haunting ending with just the right amount of ambiguity. I rated it 4.25 stars. James by Percival Everett is a historical fiction literary thriller that reimagines Mark Twain's The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, but from the perspective of the enslaved man, James. If you're unfamiliar with the story, James has been unfortunately sold off and is going to be separated from his family, and so he decides to go on the run to avoid that. He then bumps into Huckleberry Finn, who has faked his own death to escape his abusive father, and the two embark on a life-changing journey. This was so gut-wrenching and powerful. It was so interesting to me to see James's character transcend beyond his original portrayal of being a supporting character in Huckleberry Finn's journey. This was hard-hitting, yet also tender and somehow humorous at times. It made me think, it filled me with rage, and it had me tearing up several times throughout. I just absolutely love it when a book can take me through an array of emotions, and this one definitely achieved that. I truly could sing this book's praises all day long. I love the direction that the ending took, and I just thought that it was fantastically written and told. Initially, after I finished it, I was like, this is a 5-star read, but I'm so petty and I'm sorry for this, but I did want a little bit more from James's relationships beyond what we got. It kind of felt like a bulk of the relationships that he was developing were just to catapult the story forward. I don't know, maybe I'm just being nitpicky, but I'm rating this book 4.75 stars. Knock Knock Open Wide by Neil Sharpson is available on Kindle Unlimited, and this is an Irish supernatural folk horror book. In the 70s, we follow Ethan, and she discovers a corpse and endures a night of supernatural horrors. 2 decades later, we follow her daughter Aisling as she links family tragedies to a sinister children's puppet show. This is culty, filled with Irish folklore, has so many moving parts and characters, and had my head absolutely spinning. I really loved the vibes. I just love folk horror. There's just something all-consuming and atmospheric about it that I just eat up every time. And while I am not a romance reader typically, I really enjoy a little sapphic romance subplot in my horror. All that to be said, this book got real confusing for me. Because there are so many characters and so many different elements introduced, it was hard for me at times to figure out what I should be paying attention to, and I feel like I walked away from this read with more questions than I had answers. While I really love ambiguity in my horror, this felt more like there were just loose ends, unless I missed something. There's just so many things that are introduced in this story that, I don't know, I feel like it kind of took away from the central plot line that I was trying to figure out. But overall, truly, this was such an engaging read. I was very entertained. I found it very emotionally charged, and I did find myself connecting to many of the characters throughout the story. So I'm rating it 4 stars. You'll Be Sorry by Lisa Gardner is a thriller that follows Raquel and Theo, and they have just purchased a lodge that once belonged to the Dixon family that vanished many years ago. When a stray dog leads them to some remains on the property, a new light is shined on the case. We follow both the couple and also the detective that is looking into the case, named Amanda Grady. Her dad was the original detective on the case, and now she's following in his footsteps. This was an interesting read and didn't really read like a typical thriller mystery. It's set in this town that has a very strange history. There are whisperings of witchcraft and treasure hunts. And while I thought that that was very intriguing, I did feel like I got a bit too heavy-handed on the historical elements of this town, that for me it did ultimately take away from the enjoyment of the experience of the actual disappearance itself, though ultimately, of course, everything is all connected. I also will say that I did enjoy the witchy angle. I always enjoy some like witchy folklore that's weaved into a story. It kind of gives it the vibe of a horror read without being outright horror. Out of all the characters, I did find Amanda, the detective, the most compelling, and I found myself more invested in the story whenever her parts came up versus any of the other characters. I don't know, I feel like this book had so many elements that typically would work for me, but for some reason I just felt a disconnect while I was reading it. The ending was also just not my favorite. I am someone who can totally suspend disbelief, and I don't need my fiction reads to be grounded in reality, but the way that it was done, I don't know, personally it just didn't work for me. Overall, I thought this was a solid story and one that I would recommend. It's just definitely not a favorite of mine, and I'm rating it 3.25 to 3.5 stars. One of the Family by Mark Edwards is a thriller that follows Patrick, and he's joining his girlfriend Holly on their family vacation, just to be entangled in a sinister family plot. This year, tensions are at an all-time high because not only is Holly introducing her boyfriend Patrick, but Holly and her siblings are also meeting their father's very young new fiance, who they are convinced is only with him for his money because he is a very wealthy tech CEO. You want to guess what I'm gonna say? Yeah, this wasn't my vibe. I don't like wealthy people stories. I don't like rich people behaving badly. I don't mind if they have money, but when the money becomes part of the central plot and a driving force for the story, I check out, and that happened with this. That being said, there was some personal drama throughout that I really did enjoy and is what ultimately kept me engaged and kept me reading the story, and I do love Mark Edwards, so I decided just to trust the process. This story immediately reminded me of Secluded Cabin Sleep 6 by Lisa Unger, and throughout felt very reminiscent of it, especially with the advancement of technology side of things. I truly don't have too much to say about this book. I think that Mark Edwards crafts together a really well-written story. I think he gives his characters a lot of layers, and there were parts throughout that I did enjoy, but yeah, ultimately this just didn't resonate with me. But if you're somebody who does like rich people behaving badly and money-motivated type of stories, then this absolutely could be for you. I read it at 3 stars. Stay Buried by Jennifer McMahon publishes on August 11th, and this is a dual timeline folk horror book. In 1919, we follow Frankie, and she works with her uncle who teaches her medicine. When there is this strange outbreak of an illness that affects horses and then goes on to affect people as well. As locals begin looking for answers, they soon start to suspect supernatural occult forces. Then we have a 2016 timeline, and we're following Ashley and Malcolm and their siblings, and they have inherited a home from their grandmother after her passing. After discovering a journal, they soon start to uncover the dark secrets and strange practices of this small town, the same town that we're following in 1919. Folk horror is my favorite subgenre of horror. There is no question about that. Creepy towns, strange practices, so many dark secrets, and I am just so locked in. I loved the incorporation of this character that is the Neckerman. If you don't know what an Neckerman is, it has to do with disposing of animal parts. It's somebody's job. They get rid of animal parts after the animal has died or has been sick. So trigger warning. Anyway, the Neckerman is this local legend of sorts. They believe that he was patient zero when this animal plague broke out. Even in present day, he is very incorporated in the locals' lives. I just thought it was so creative, so sinister, so spooky. I absolutely loved the vibes. Typically, when I'm reading a dual timeline story, I definitely connect to one set of characters over the other, and while I did feel a special connection to the 1919 storyline with Frankie and her budding sapphic romance, I truly didn't find myself like being upset that I was switching timelines at any point, and I was really invested in both of the storylines going on and was so curious to see how everything would connect. Yeah, I was just having a great time the whole time. I'm sitting here trying to think of like anything in the story that didn't work for me, and I'm coming up empty. This was just an amazing, immersive slow burn. It was so unique and creative and well crafted and well done. The characters were well developed and I was invested in their well-being. It had me feeling unsettled. It was atmospherically dark. It had me emotionally invested, and I think it pulled off everything it's set to pull off in a very satisfactory way. This absolutely is my favorite Jennifer McMahon book I've read so far, and I am rating it 5 stars. Thank you so much for watching. Please drop me a comment and let me know your favorite book that you read last week. My favorite book I read last week was Stay Buried by Jennifer McMahon.